Thank you everyone for joining us. It's right at about 4 o'clock and we've got a packed agenda today. So I think we will go ahead and get started. So let's start by, I'll introduce myself and then we'll look at the panel and they can introduce themselves as well before we get going and soak them for all the wonderful information the three of them have about fundraising. So my name is Jackie McLaughlin. I work for Chazen and I'm in the technical review department. Chazen is an outsourced accounting firm. We do, well, I'm sure our business development people wouldn't love this expression, but I like to call it a la carte services. So we can accommodate whatever your needs are, whether they're just payables or all the way through full charge bookkeeping and CFO services. We can accommodate that. So that said, I'm going to look to you, Christine, to give us an introduction of you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christine Perez. I am the president of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Miami chapter. I'm grateful to be here today. And I also have a full-time job as the senior director of philanthropic services at the Community Foundation of Broward. I'm really excited to kind of dig in on everyone's favorite subject, fundraising.
Thanks for being here, Christine. Anna, I'll defer to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anna Martinez. I'm the AVP of Development at Miami-Dade College Foundation, and I've been fundraising for 35 years, which means I started when I was 4. I've had 3 different organizations, different sizes, different scopes, and frankly, it's all I've wanted to do for many, many years, and I adore this industry. I've done it all from very small gifts to major gifts to mega gifts to endowments and bequests and even international fundraising, which is a really big conversation. But at the end of the day, the fundamentals rule. So I'm so happy to be here. Jackie, thank you, and to Chastain for hosting us.
Thank you, Anna. And Sandra, last but definitely not least.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Sandra Davis. I am the founder and CEO of Donorly. At Donorly, we partner with small and mid-sized nonprofits, primarily arts and culture organizations, during moments of growth and change to strengthen their fundraising muscle through donor research, storytelling, and community building. First and foremost, I really want to create joy around fundraising for fundraisers and for donors. And I have a passion for behavioral science and brain science, so that informs a lot of what I do. Before I started my company about 12 years ago, I was an in-house development professional for performing arts works like the Met Opera, New York Philharmonic, and the Public Theater. So really excited to be here with all of you and talk about my favorite subject.
Well, thank you, Sandra. On that, we're going to just plow forward and dive in. So we'll start with my first question, which I want to hear what each of you has to say on this question, but let me kind of set up the context for it a little bit, because all of us see, and certainly our nonprofit constituents see, that particularly in 2025, there's a greater need to raise funds. And again, particularly if you've been heavily grant funded and you're finding that now that's starting to minimize a little bit. From our perspective, from a finance accounting perspective, I think we would always have said that nonprofits, just like for-profits, and by the way, just like everybody on this call, we need to diversify our revenue streams. And that has become even more important right now with everything going on in Washington, D.C. So that said, and I'm going to go in order of everybody on my screen. Christine, I'm going to start with you, and then Anna and Sandra, I'm going to ask you the same question, please, which is, what do you see as the most important shifts nonprofits need to make in their fundraising strategies in the next few years?
Well, I kind of in line with everything you just said, continuing to diversify your revenue streams and really look towards focusing on reserve, endowment, and planned giving. Because when you go after just those cash gifts that pay for the moment, so to speak, you're leaving a lot of revenue on the table. Roughly, depending on who you speak to, about 90% of donors' assets are in non-cash. So I think a strong focus on developing, if you don't already have one, a planned giving program, and also focusing on reserve and endowment. I mean, here at the Community Foundation of Broward, we have nearly 350 million in assets and promote the power of endowment to ensure that there are forever funds to continue to serve the growing needs of the community. It's important that not just higher ed and hospitals, I mean, they're known so much for having a great endowment, but we want all nonprofits of all different kinds to really dig into, growing an endowment, establishing an endowment, and also focusing on planned giving as part of your overarching fundraising strategy.
Christine, let me briefly deeper dive into something that you said. You said a couple minutes ago that I think you said 90% or over 90% of donors have non-cash gifts. Can you give examples of a non-cash gift that this huge percentage of donors have?
Absolutely. Things like gifts of highly appreciated stock, gifts from maybe your IRA, a qualified charitable distribution, meeting that required minimum distribution. I mean, those are huge. You can also accept anything depending on your organization's gift acceptance policy, from a gift of real estate, from a gift from a donor advised fund. I mean, there's so many different ways than just current cash giving. And when working with a financial planner or a CPA or an estate attorney, you can be really savvy in your philanthropy and strategize a little differently.
Thank you. Anna, we're going to go back to the question. What are the most important shifts you think nonprofits need to make in the next few years?
I think definitely sort of the speed in which things are moving, which is incredibly fast and faster. And we are having some serious conversations here at the foundation at Miami-Dade College around AI and how to introduce it into fundraising. And there is no substitute for the human touch. So let me make sure that I put that front and center. However, when we're doing a more deeper dive and getting a little more sophisticated of short-term, mid-term, long-term, it's almost like at home, right? We have a checking account, a savings account, and a retirement fund. And I echo everything that was said 150%. And so I would lay on top of that just the urgency of adopting technologies to kind of serve us as best as they can to be able to cast wider nets. And what do I mean by that? Being able to contact more people, being able to do a wider outreach. That diversification is easier said than done, right? So given the resources that we have, if so, then what? What can we possibly do? And it is that kind of a mind shift where how do I do more with the same or sometimes even less? And how do I scale? And it is true that, a lot of these gifts need to be set up. And there's also something that all of us, I promise you, all of us forget about, and it's regifting. A gift that is a multi-year gift, a gift that is a continuous giving gift. I used to, when I had a huge team, my team is smaller now, but when I had a huge team, I used to say, don't waste time re-campaigning or re-fundraising. Talk to people so that their gift is continuous and it comes in on a yearly basis, and then you can shift that time invested that way to something else and reach more people.
So Anna, let me deep dive a little bit into something that I think you just said, which is, go back to some of your donors, and hopefully I'm stating that correctly, for continuous gifts.
Mm-hmm.
Is donor fatigue a problem when you do that? And if so, how do you overcome that?
I think you have to be very frank and very sincere. And it all boils down to, and I'm so happy someone talked about the relationship and the psychology of people. if that is something we sense, and we have to have contact and connection with people, if that's something that starts to bubble up, then it needs to be addressed. And there has to be engagement opportunities and interest, and again, that personal touch. And just because someone's been giving you a contribution for 10 years, that doesn't mean they shouldn't require a call or a personal approach. Actually, sometimes those smaller gifts that are sustainable for many years are the foundation for bequests and bigger types of gifts. So I think it's really important to make sure that that personal interaction is always in place.
And so the point, though, Anna, I think, if I'm understanding this right, is that personal interaction, if it's continuous and genuine, can help prevent donor fatigue.
Correct. It is the antidote. The antidote to donor fatigue is relationships. And not just a relationship, it's like, let's go for coffee. I mean, honestly, people just want to be heard. People want to tell their story. And we, as fundraisers, that is truly our job. If we listen, and trust me, all of us love to talk, sign me up. But if we truly listen to what the donor has to say, and sort of, again, I would go back to our ability to systematize things and categorize things. You know, some people don't want to get any more emails. Other people want to get a text. Some people rather eat glass than get a text. So we need to start getting a little more specific with what are the wants, likes, and dislikes of our donors. And we have tools today that we've never had before. And we're all, how do I do more? I can't do any more. We're all working more hours in the day, but you know, if we start thinking about how do I turn this technology and all the tools that I have into I just lost my assistant. She got a divorce, she moved out of town, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do now? And it's like, I'm not kidding. I work out of college, so I've taken every AI class you could possibly imagine, and it's like now AI does my calendar. It does a million things that it's not as nice as she was, but it's pretty good. Pretty good.
And I love that you brought that up, Anna. And then Sandra, I'm going to throw you a curveball in a minute. I love that you brought that up, Anna, because one of the things that we talk to our nonprofits about, it's not necessarily in the fundraising realm, but to your point, work smarter, not harder. And so oftentimes we find that they go through many processes that add no value.
No.
So if we can go in and make them more efficient, then you can do more. Although I would argue, because I kind of don't like that expression, because people think I can't do anymore, I'm already burned out. And it's not doing more, it's doing things that have value and yield results. And on that note, Sandra, I'm going to pivot off this question completely, because when you introduced yourself, you said you want to bring joy to donors and fundraisers. So can you talk a little bit about joyful fundraising?
Sure. I think Anna brought it up, really. I think that the idea is to build relationships and to meet donors where they are. If you can create a situation where a donor really feels heard and really feels a sense of belonging in and with your organization, then they are going to experience joy at the point where they've made a gift. And you, as the fundraiser, ideally are going to have a great time getting to know that donor, getting to build that relationship. After all, you have a shared love of your organization. And so why not build on that? And it should feel like a partnership. It should feel like an investment. It should feel like you as a fundraiser are creating a bridge between your organization and the donor's opportunity to invest in that organization. And all of those things, it's as simple as can be. It's really all about the relationships, but being authentic about that. Everybody can feel, every person on this planet can feel when they're in a conversation that's not authentic. So make sure that you're, having those kinds of conversations and interactions that are, really meaningful. And I promise you, the joy is going to bubble up from that.
So I love this now because 2/3 of you, and I'm sure if I go back to Christine, she's going to echo everything Anna, you and Sandra said, that you're coming at it from different perspectives. Anna came at it from what do nonprofits have to do to adjust their fundraising techniques in the next few years. Sandra, you came at it from how do you make fundraising more joyful? But the bottom line is the same, that it's all about that relationship building to enhance your fundraising in the next few years and also to have more fun. And Sandra, I'm going to briefly go back to you because I love brain science as well. So I'm going to ask you, because I think I know what your answer is. If you're having more fun and if your donors are having more fun, I'm guessing it's going to result in better fundraising results.
Absolutely. I mean, there are, things that light up in your brain. Now, I'm not a brain scientist. I just, kind of just love the idea. So I don't maybe have all of the technical jargon, but there are ways that your brain lights up when you give money. There is research to show that. And I think it's about the connection between two people or between a person and something they love. So that is, and people remember that, feeling, and then it's you get the bug and you want to do it again and you want to dig deeper. So it really is kind of a wonderful cycle.
I think this question, Christine, may dovetail into what Anna and Sandra just talked about. But from your perspective, what do donors want today that they didn't want 10 years ago? And how should nonprofits be responding?
So obviously, building upon everything that Anna and Sandra said, I agree 150%. Relationships. And I think donors have always wanted this, but I think they want this even more. And that's quality connection and personalization. Because I think donors, they're just like us. They know that we have all these efficiency tools. We have all these ways to work faster and smarter. And while it's amazing to elevate them, it's important that we continue to make all of our connections as personal as possible. So again, what Anna said, if a donor, that they want to be contacted via email, make sure your records are perfect or as accurate as possible. So when that email goes out to that donor, if that's how they want to be connected, the email is right. And I know that it's not fun to talk about clean up your database, but it's so important because as we as fundraisers continue to add these efficiency tools brought to us by AI and all of these different methods of communication, our records have to be that much better so we can deliver on the quality relationship building that I think donors crave for. And candidly, we all do. We want to feel not just like a name on a list or in a spreadsheet or in a database. We want to feel like we're really making a difference regardless of our gift size. So continuing to do everything we can in our power to continue building that strong relationship and personalization. And I think if you ask in 10 more years what donors want, the answer is going to be the same. They're going to continue to want that personalization and relationship building.
Well, and Christine, something on your point, but a little adjacent to your point. You and I talked a number of months ago, I think just in a meeting that we were in, and you mentioned, which I loved this, and by the way, Christine, I quote you often about this. You mentioned that when you're sitting across the table from a large donor, and I believe at the time you used the word donor, but I would imagine grantors are the same. Many of them have already gone to the Guide Stars of the world and downloaded that 990, and they're firing questions at you. Why aren't you spending more on your program? Or, gosh, this is so great, you're spending so much on your program. Whatever your 990 indicates. So you just mentioned it's really important to keep your data clean. And I know you were talking about your donor data and what they like and so forth. But it's also important to keep your number data, your financial data clean, because that does get uploaded to GuideStar. And I'm not sure if Charity Navigator uploads it, but definitely GuideStar. It does become matter of public record. And Christine, I believe what you said, and I hope I'm not misquoting you, donors do look at that and they do ask you questions.
Oh, 100 times over. I can't tell you how many times I've had a meeting with a donor and I want to start it, and just getting to know them, and they're quoting our 990, they're quoting their our tax returns and asking detailed questions. So as great as an organization can be, as great as your mission is, if your finances don't tell that same story, a very savvy donor is going to kind of ask questions about that. And so as the fundraiser, you also have to know your financials. So if a donor comes with that question, you can answer them correctly. And honestly, in grant applications, a lot of times, right after you upload your 990 and your audit, the next question is if you have a deficit, get ready to explain it. Like, why is this an outlier year? What changed? What material things? And so you have to be able to accurately explain that difference to those donors, because transparency is key. And we want to make sure that our donors trust us, trust our financials, trust our records, both donor data and financials, so they can feel comfortable and lean into that joyful giving that we know philanthropy does.
And I love that you brought that up, Christine, because you mentioned they ask about deficits, and there's a misconception out there that nonprofits can't make a profit, but they can, and they should if they want to sustain themselves long term. And if nonprofits were focused on that, as the grant funding minimizes, they would have more in reserves and wouldn't maybe be quite as panicked. Because to go back to Anna's point earlier on, which is that nonprofit finances are no different than our own. You've got your checking account, your temporary savings account, and your retirement or emergency savings and your retirement. And nonprofits are the exact same way. Only way to bolster that is to function more like a for-profit in terms of, again, what we talked about earlier. What your staff and you should be doing should be activities that produce high value results, not just activities that keep you busy 50 hours a week, but may or may not produce the results that you want. So, Anna, I'm going to go over to you a little off that tangent because you mentioned working at a college. Let me run one of my thoughts that I had earlier today by you, and please either tell me I'm a genius or shoot it down, one of the two. So, kind of something Christine touched on a little bit was this idea of giving. Well, you all did actually, giving, donor relationships, etc. I'm almost wondering if it's getting more difficult, because certainly with the internet becoming so much bigger, every single day. And I know for me, I went online earlier today to buy some shampoo, and now I'm getting social media ads for, 150,000 different types of shampoo. So I would imagine, but Anna, this is where I want you to call me a genius or tell me I'm crazy, that donors have that same kind of problem because of social media and transparency, not just social media, but the internet. Transparency, of course, is good, but now there's potentially more message, I'm going to call it marketing messaging going to donors. So there's more nonprofits going to an individual donor. So go ahead and tell me if I've lost my mind on that.
No, you are a genius, and I'll tell you a couple of components, right? So you are a genius, and I'm going to talk about hallucination in a minute because that happens, right? But I want to go back because I'm listening so attentively when you talked about what donors want. I do want to answer that. 2 words, well, a couple. They don't want you to waste anything. Like waste is sin, and that's huge. But back to this piece, I think that it has a lot to do with the marketing component. There's a huge opportunity and a sad one for miscommunication, misinformation, or those entities that have the wherewithal to sort of get ahead of others that do not. And it's scary and dangerous, not to mention the fact that there's opportunity for misinformation. My husband and I were watching a podcast yesterday where they had AI videos of, it doesn't matter the details, but it was something that was untrue, and they were showing how it just wasn't the case. So A, too much information. B, who manages that information, and C, misinformation. So not you're a genius 3 times over. The way you combat that is by, I understand about donor fatigue, and the difference between donor fatigue and donor engagement is the amount of asking. And you're talking to someone who was born asking, like that was the drill, right? Ask, no matter what. You got to close, ABC, always be closing. So I'm all about that. However, there's a lot of noise going on, and it's important to regulate yourself. Be your entity. Don't worry about everybody else. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. If your entity is like this, then kind of stick to that piece and scale and move in your space. Don't necessarily think you have to do it all at once, because none of us can't. I don't care how many resources you have. It's kind of crazy out there. So I know I'm not being specific, but that's the point, that the specificity has to do with who we are as an organization. Think of fashion. You could get on Amazon, you were shopping for shampoo, go find a red jacket. It's almost like results, 7,687 red jackets. And it's like, oh my God, how do I choose? So how do we then become the jacket that they're looking for? Well, we happen to have the one that has the perfect lining. That's who my organization is. We focus on lining, and if somebody doesn't want a lining, then they're not going to buy my jacket. So you gotta straddle that reality of volume versus individualism. If you have a good product, and we all do, that's the beauty of the work that we do. And I love that we talk about joy, because I always used to say fundraising starts with fun, and if somebody's not having fun, we're not doing it right. So joy is certainly a part of it. And I just read something. Mackenzie Phillips gave somebody, I don't know, 80 million. A university, $80 million. I'm like, oh,
Howard University.
Howard, right? Howard. I love Howard University, but I'm like, dude, why didn't you call me? But what are you gonna do? Move on. Go to the next thing. Maybe it's not Mackenzie. Maybe it's the woman down the street who's not gonna give me the 80 million, but I'll take $8,000. I'll take it. I'm okay with that. So you gotta just kind of keep rolling and be true to yourself.
Well, and I want to spin off something you said, and Sandra, I'm going to shoot this one to you, but also let me ask the question, and then we'll put up a poll for our listeners today. And that question, Sandra, that I'll look to you for after the poll is, Anna said, if you want to buy a red jacket, you'll have 7,000 red jackets pop up. So you have to be the red jacket that somebody wants to buy. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to pivot off that, Sandra, and maybe give your thoughts on how a nonprofit can be that red jacket that somebody wants to buy. But first, I'm going to ask Maddie from our team, who I'm going to call Magical Maddie because she's behind the scenes, to go ahead and put up one of the polls for our listeners. We'll give it about 10 more seconds. So it's kind of interesting. The poll is how many funding sources does your organization rely on for 80% of your revenue? Certainly 3 to 4 sources is the standout winner, but overall the difference between each one wasn't that different. So we've got people on the call who have various numbers of funding sources. That said, Sandra, how do we make our nonprofit be the red jacket that everybody wants to buy?
Yeah, I think just layering on what Anna said, layering a red jacket on what Anna said, I guess, is the idea of niching down in terms of your messaging. So really being very specific. One of the things I hear a lot from my clients, like let's say around Giving Tuesday, for example, how can we, we're a small organization, if we get out there, there's so much going on, everybody's inbox is full, everybody's social media is full, but the reality is that may be true, but everybody's inbox is different and everybody's social media feed is different. And there's lots of people who you may be reaching out to who are only getting one email about one red jacket, even though there are other people who are getting, 10 emails about every color of jacket. So, stay in your lane, be true to what you want to message, and you're going to find the people who want to find you as well. And don't worry about what else is happening. You just have to have your message, tell your story really powerfully, tell it in a way that people can respond to, a story about a person, not a story about data. So if you think about fashion, the way fashion stories are told is in beautiful pictures. You've got somebody wearing this beautiful jacket in this beautiful setting, and that's the kind of story you want to tell about your organization and your programs. A story that kind of invites people in, gets them listening, gets them engaged in photos, videos, text, but making sure that it's something that people have an emotional connection to.
And I love a little bit of what you said, Sandra, and the other part I'm deeply hurt. It's stories, not data. So,
well,
and I only say that a little tongue in cheek because we do data, but let me run this one by you though. Another one of our platforms at Chazen is that data can become a story.
Yes,
because
yes.
or not even become, data is the story, because everything you do in your organization has a financial consequence, everything. And so your financial data can be interpreted into the story that data is telling. Do you want to
100%.
make right with me, Sandra?
Yes, I'm very sorry, Jackie. I'm very sorry. So that is absolutely true. And just getting back to the conversation about the 990 too, I think that I really agree. And 990 is a great communication tool, and both with numbers, and there are places where you can tell stories within a 990. Yes. And if you can do that there, do it. So I always use the analogy of buying a car. Now we all think that we go to buy, I live in Manhattan, so I don't have a car, but we all go to buy a car, and we may think once we get off, we've decided what we're going to buy, we get off the lot, what we think we've done is, this is the safest car, this is the best vehicle for gas mileage, whatever. We have all this data that we use to justify the purchase. But what we're really doing is we're justifying our emotional connection to a thing that is tied to our identity. Maybe it's our favorite color, maybe it smells great. And then we use the data to feel really good about making a decision that was probably a little bit emotional. So data is a really important part of the storytelling. I'm just suggesting you start with the story about one person who is impacted by the work that you're doing, and then the data has to back it up, because it's a relationship with an organization is not going to last long if what you're doing is not effective.
Yeah, and I hope you know I was just teasing you a little.
Did I make it right with you? Is that?
Yes, I feel much better now. Because another thing the data can do, and Christine, I'm going to throw this one over to you, is I'm going to give you an example, a real life example from my life. I had an executive director tell me how their advancement development team were killing it. They were doing so well that year and everything was roses and sunshine. And I had to, and I'm sure the advancement team thought that, because sometimes perception and reality are two different things. And so I'm sure the advancement team had a number of wonderful meetings with potential donors or existing donors or whatever, and they thought they were killing it. But I had to gently let this executive director know that, well, based on the numbers, no, the advancement team really wasn't killing it at all. In fact, they were doing worse than they had done the previous year. So I would argue, and Christine, I'm going to look to you to weigh in that, and by the way, Sandra, yes, data needs to be, the story is most important because people like that emotional connection from the story. But I would argue that the story needs to come from the data. Again, my example, this executive director who thought her advancement team was killing it, but the data didn't support that. Christine, go ahead and weigh in on that.
Yeah, I think you as a fundraiser really need to have a good connection with your finance team. Like I know that my success in organizations has been tied to knowing what our financials our actuals are. So being able to have those regular ongoing conversation and communication with your finance team, having maybe a monthly meeting where you go, hey, and also you looking at your numbers. I know I used to have at least a monthly meeting with our finance team and say, all right, I'm showing these results. What are you showing in your financials? And obviously understanding that accounting isn't going to line up from development from like what you raise versus what the best practices for accounting. But I know that having that touch point with your finance team and making sure that you're aligned and also comparing to prior years. So elevating and looking at that data regularly. I mean, fundraising, of course, so much of it is relationship building, engaging, but then it's that super other fun part where it's looking at your numbers, looking at your data, having an admin days to look and make sure that your finances match up. And if they don't, there might be a reason why. What external factors are impacting your fundraising results? Are you down a team member, or have things changed? Maybe it's the COVID year and you don't get to do your event. What are you going to do? But having those continuous conversations about how you raise the funds and being really in contact with your finance officer. I mean, I used to have a finance director that would say, just because you're not for profit doesn't mean you should be for loss. And that is like ingrained in my head because they told me continuously, like, and I agree, like, it's your finances are almost the most important thing, because you can have the most incredible mission in the world, but if you can't keep the doors on, your mission's not going to serve anyone. So I know I kind of was a little bit all over the place, but it's because it's such a nuanced topic, and you have to, we as fundraisers are balancing so many things, the relationship building and raising funds and authenticity, but also going back and looking at the data and seeing where you align. Are you hitting your benchmarks? And if not, why? And have those conversations regularly and consistently so you don't get blindsided down the line.
And I think the other thing that's important about that, Christine, is having a finance team who doesn't speak accounting, who can give you the data that, I mean, they can speak accounting, but not to you, who can give you the data that you need without using these terms that non-accountants don't know, nor should they know. I mean, fundraising people use a lot of terms that I don't know as an accountant, and it's the other way is vice versa as well. So having that finance professional who doesn't just speak accounting. And Anna, I'm going to kick it over to you because Christine said something that made me think about things you had said earlier. You've touched on scaling your fundraising efforts. And something that Christine said that I would think would help you scale is she talked about an admin day. So do you agree with that, that you have to have some sort of administration in your schedule, or what are your ideas for helping an organization scale?
You know, I would say an admin moment. It needs to occur on a daily basis. And I was listening to the conversation, and in my mind's eye, one of my favorite symbols is the yin and the yang. You know, half of this and half of that, and a little drop on each side. And I do believe that we are emotive creatures, and therefore storytelling sort of is always what drives us. However, it's at one point when I was listening, I thought of, oh my God, just go to any board meeting. You could have the most beautiful mission moment where there's tears and violins, and then comes the finance report, and the chairman or the chairwoman's going to go, say what? So honestly, I would say that it depends on the way you work, but I typically will come in and also what database you're using, what's the information you've got, is Jason giving you a report, but we process our gifts, and every morning I get here super early. I'm one of those crazy people that is an early riser, and I look at Razor's Edge and I'm like, did anything come in? So I think it is, regardless of the frequency, if you're not on top of your numbers, you're not fundraising, because at the end of the day, it is, here, I'll tell you my philosophy, my fundraising philosophy in a nutshell: people first, money second, third, fourth, and fifth, and don't forget the people come. That's it. And so not to be on top of your numbers, and it's okay if a donor asks you a question, or a colleague or your boss, and you say, I don't know, but better go find out. You got to be on top of them. You really need to know and ask questions. And, you know, sometimes in organizations, we have segments, and we speak different languages, and that's okay. But nothing builds team more than a genuine interest on what it is that you do. And you know, when you collaborate with an entity like yours, such as, and then you kind of have that rapport of, listen, talk to me about my data, tell me what, okay, so I got this report, help me understand, decode it for me, where are my gaps? I'm not seeing the laws that I need to sort of surface. As a matter of fact, I have a report that I need to work on, and I was talking to my colleague, and I said, I'm going to call it my missing money report. Is what came in last year that hasn't come in this year, that we need to look and go back and make sure we don't have money left on the table. That's serious, you know, and you cannot close out the year in December and do that in January and go, whoopsie. No. It's constant.
No, and on the other side of this, and Sandra, I'm going to kick this over to you. The other side of this that I spend time talking to executive directors about, example, if you're going to accept a grant, and maybe it's a grant to build a school in Colombia, and you need to know how much it's going to cost you to build that school in Colombia. And if it's going to cost $7 million and your grant is only for 5, You need to know that up front, because the worst thing that you can do to every single person on this panel is wait until the 10th month of your fiscal year and say, oh, you have to go raise another $2 million to cover this grant, to cover this project to build a school in Colombia. So Sandra, I will go ahead and go any way you want with that. Or just veer off and go in another direction.
Well, the cost of the school in Colombia, if you set it at 7 million, it's probably 8, 9, or 10 million anyway. So you better be raising more than that 7 million as you go. Yes. Yeah, that is a really tricky situation, and I think that requires, at any time that giving is driven by a donor or grantor that requires additional fundraising that maybe you weren't expecting to do, for example, then you really have to have a moment at the organization to figure out if that's really where you want to go and what you want to do. And I would say in that case, presumably you want to build the school, then be very transparent with the grantor at the very beginning. This is very generous. We have, a lot more to do before we can get started, and we'll keep you posted, as we go along.
So Sandra, something that you said that warmed my heart is that you said that perhaps sometimes you just might have to turn it down and say, thank you very much, but we just can't execute on this.
I think it's really important to stay true to your mission, to your values. There have been several times in my career, for all kinds of reasons, that a gift or a grant had to be returned to the donor, and it hurts. It's no fun, because you've worked hard to build that relationship. But the truth is if it's not aligned with your mission, if it gets into kind of mission creep or scope creep in order to be able to accept that gift, and it sends people veering down another path in order to make good on that gift in the way the donor might want to, then it's not worth it. And also, if the donor, is not aligned with your values, that's another hard situation. But there are times when you just need to part ways with donors. You don't have to accept every single gift.
So Christine, I'm going to punt this to you. Sandra just said words that are very interesting. She said, you may have to part ways if a donor doesn't align with your values. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why wouldn't a donor align with your values, for example?
Sure. And I would say, I brought it up a little bit earlier, and it's like the best tool that kind of saves you. It's your gift acceptance policy. Right. So you make it not personal. So number one, so it's never personal. It's, you always want to lean in on your mission focus. So does this align with your mission? And when you have that gift acceptance policy that is clearly outlined, that identifies all the types of gifts you can offer, that you can accept, and reasons why you might not be able to accept a gift and why maybe you might have to turn that donor away, you have a board approved get out of jail free card on why you can't accept that gift. And I remember earlier in my career, I kind of shrugged off and shirked off the importance of a gift acceptance policy. But when you have a donor trying to give you a gift that is a huge liability as an organization, like, we don't need a boat. Like, what are we going to do with a boat? We can't sell it. We can't, like, what are we going to do? But when you have that gift acceptance policy, it's a nice, loving way to say, thank you so much for thinking of us. We really appreciate you. You're just the heart's in the right place. But unfortunately, it's above me. Our board, we can't accept the gift. We can't accept the gift. And then also, like, for having to part ways with the donor, it's, again, always about mission and the core values of an organization. And so just reiterating the strengths of your organization. And I think a lot of times, donors understand, and they understand things aren't personal, why you can't accept a gift. And it's just having, we've kind of talked about earlier, being authentic and having those honest relationships. Like we said, a donor can tell if you're not being true or you're not telling the truth, not being honest and transparent. So just continuing that communication and lean on that gift acceptance policy, my friends.
I love that you brought that up. So I think we're going to wind down with the gift acceptance policy that I am going to shoot to both Anna and Sandra. But let me give you a good example of that from my life before I came to Chazen. When I worked for a nonprofit, the nonprofit had been given years before real estate. Now, on its face value, I think everybody's gut reaction would be, oh my gosh, who wouldn't want real estate? Even if you don't want to hold it, you can sell it and convert it to cash. Well, what this organization found out, again, for the record before my time, was that this real estate was not sellable. It was, and I don't remember, it wasn't zoned right. You just couldn't develop it. And I don't remember all the whys and wherefores. So the organization was, I'm going to say it stuck with a lot of acres of real estate that they could not convert to cash and had to pay property taxes on every year and maintain it, and all it costs that on the surface you may not even think about, or you may not think that real estate wasn't a good thing to take. Again, most people would go, oh my gosh, real estate's always great. So Anna, do you want to address gift acceptance policies? And I'm going to leave the topic of gift acceptances first for you, Anna, then for Sandra, and you can say anything you want about those. No specific question.
Absolutely. And you know, there are some gifts that end up costing you money.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like the reverse of what the intent is, right? So run, walk away. So
like a broken down car, Anna, would cost you money to fix it up, and you know.
Yeah, and even some real estate, then you have to engage lawyers, and it cannot be sold. And I mean, it varies, but it's really important. And you know, I think that a lot has to do with the size of the entity that you are a part of, and the complexity, and your board, and who you can go to for counsel and guidance. And there's a huge scope within that. And, you know, maybe you can go to someone and just say, I think asking for advice is critical in these instances, because what happens is that the gift acceptance, I completely agree. I cannot tell you how many times that thing has saved me. I'm like, hello. However, donors are sticky and complicated. And then what about this? And what about that? And what if we did this? And what if we, and you're like, oh my God, oh my God. So getting counsel sometimes and getting outside your own head, and whether it's a volunteer or a colleague or someone on the panel, and reach out to one of us and a colleague who does this work and say, I had someone that I used to work with for years, and she and I hadn't talked in decades. And she calls me up, she goes, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I have the weirdest question. And I'm like, shoot. And it was so much fun, because she goes, what do I do with this thing? And it was something like, this is one of those complicated things. And the donor was demanding certain things. And I'm like, you know, but it's almost like, you know how you know the answer, but then when you hear that confirmation, you're like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is not worth it. Because as fundraisers and loving the organizations that we're a part of as much as we do, saying no to us is almost like an alien concept. However, we need to have that foresight to say down the road, A, this could be a problem, which is even worse than costing money, but B, it could end up costing money and doing exactly the opposite of what I'm working towards. So gift acceptance, they rule, and counsel and guidance from colleagues help a lot. And at the end, trust your gut. Trust your gut. It will not fail you.
I love that. And Sandra, I'm going to hold off just a second because we are coming up against time. So I'm going to ask if Maddie's got a question in, if anybody watching or listening has a question, we'll give that one to you. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you about gift acceptance policies too.
Great. So yes, fan, absolute fan. And then one thing to think about is that you can give assets like real estate to a DAF fund, and then they can manage liquidating it. So if you don't have the wherewithal or interest in accepting something, a complex asset like that, you could advise your donor to consider donating it to a DAF fund.
Now, would you mind explaining what did you say a deaf fund?
Sorry, a donor advised fund.
Gotcha.
So these are funds managed by some of the big firms, or Fidelity, Goldman Sachs, local community foundations often manage these. So this is a way for an individual to make a donation into a fund, get the tax benefit immediately, and then they can guide the distribution of that money to charitable organizations.
Insurance.
So that can include, yeah.
So we do have a question, which Sandra, I'll give this one to you. What's the most unique fundraising strategy you've seen that works? This is a great question.
The most unique fundraising strategy I've seen that works. I don't know if this is unique, but I think a perennial fundraising strategy, if done well in an event, for example, is a raise the paddle moment. It can be done very, very, badly, but if it's done really well, it can be a very, very exciting moment. And the goal is to prepare for it in advance. So you might ask some of your lead donors to make a commitment to give at a higher level. You get momentum building in the room, and give opportunity for everybody at any level to give to that raise the paddle fund a program moment. Those can be some of the most exciting fundraising moments, because it all happens, within 10 or 20 minutes.
Thank you. Christine, and we're running up, we got 4 minutes left, so I want to get to both you and Anna. Is there a unique fundraising strategy that you've seen work?
Oh yeah, yeah. I when you ask the question, I'm smiling because for us it's I am MDC Day, so Miami-Dade College MDC, and it's kind of like a birthday thing, right? And if you think about things like Give Miami Day, or those big campaigns, FIU does a 305 campaign, but it's almost like your own thing, where there is the day that celebrates the organization that when it was founded, or Earth Day if you're an environmental entity, or some day that is your day, and you create a celebration around it, and it builds momentum, and those smaller gifts can be an impetus for larger gifts.
Christine, what about you?
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest things, we as fundraisers, we can talk because we're so excited and passionate, but I think it's one of the exciting things and great ways that you can engage is if you have the ability, show a donor. So take them to campus, give them a tour so they can engage in all of their 5 senses, because I can tell a donor for days about the programming and work that we do and our mission, but when they see it in action by coming on a tour or volunteering, game over. Nothing, it's like the checkbook comes out before you even have a chance to ask, because by seeing it, hearing it, feeling it, smelling it, it's just totally invigorates and connects them to your mission.
And also, Christine, ironically, to end our session today, we kind of go back to the beginning of it, which is relationship building. And when donors can go out and see and touch your organization and what they're doing, I just think it's that human connection that we talked about with relationship building. Well, I want to thank all of you today. I'm just going to make sure there are no other questions in the chat. It doesn't look like it. I want to thank all of you so much for being here. And honestly, I'm not a fundraiser, but I could talk to the 3 of you for the next 3 hours about this. It is so interesting. And we all appreciate your valuable input very, very much. Please, for those of you watching or listening today, we do have a QR code for anybody interested in letting Jason help you with your data that Christine and Anna and Sandra were all talking about, not necessarily your donor data, the demographics of your donor, but your financial data. We can certainly help you with your financial data, which is great ammunition for every fundraiser to have good, solid financial data. And today there is a QR code on the screen for offering a bit of a discount if you'd like to get some information from us. So that said, thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy your day. And those of you who joined us here, thank you very much for your time as well.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.